She was only 8 years old, barefoot in the freezing snow, waving her arms at passing cars while her mother was being beaten just a few hundred yards away. Everyone drove past, until one man stopped. A former Marine, a stranger she had never met. What happened next didn't just save a life, it changed an entire town forever. If you think you know what courage looks like, wait until you hear what this little girl did. Before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching. Leave your city in the comments. And if you believe God sends miracles through ordinary people, subscribe and watch until the end. This story will stay with you long after the snow melts. A pale winter sunrise struggled through layers of drifting snow over Snowfield Ridge, blurring the mountain road into a muted white ribbon. Sergeant Logan Hale, 36 years old, guided his aging dark green Jeep Wrangler carefully around a frozen bend. He had the kind of face shaped by responsibility, strong jaw, faint scars along his cheekbone from deployments overseas, and deep-set gray eyes that always seemed to be watching for danger even in the safest places. Though he had officially been honorably discharged from the Marines 6 months prior, he continued volunteering with the town's small police department, partly because he didn't know how to stop serving, and partly because the quiet of civilian life still felt too large, too hollow, something he struggled to fit inside. His hair, short, regulation cut, was dark at the roots but sun-faded at the tips, a mark from years under foreign skies. His expression carried a tired kindness, the kind of man who had seen too much and still chose gentleness. In the back seat sat Ranger, his 4-year-old German Shepherd K9 partner, amber-furred, broad-chested, sharp-eared, and watchful. Ranger's coat shimmered with deep tawny hues along his spine, fading to cream near his chest and muzzle. The dog's eyes, a molten amber gold, were intelligent and loyal, eyes that tracked every shift in the world outside the window. Even retired from active duty after a blast in their last mission together, Ranger still moved with the discipline of a working dog, alert but calm, scanning each passing tree and snowbank with the precision of a soldier's shadow. Logan rubbed his thumb absent-mindedly over the leather steering wheel, his thoughts drifting toward memories he wished he could file away like old reports. Sandstorms, alarms, the metallic scent of smoke. Ranger sensed the shift and let out a soft grumble, nudging his head forward between the seats. "I'm all right, buddy," Logan murmured. But the truth was, mornings like this, quiet, cold, unhurried, often made the ghosts louder. The road curved again, and that was when it happened. A small shape burst through the haze of snowfall, so sudden, so out of place, darting directly into the Jeep's path. "Jesus!" Logan slammed the brakes. The Jeep skidded, tires screaming against packed ice. Ranger barked sharply, bracing himself as the vehicle slid sideways, finally halting several feet in front of the tiny figure standing alone in the road. A little girl, no older than 8, barefoot. Her small toes were blue against the snow. The thin pink jacket she wore was torn at the sleeve, and her long auburn hair, messy, tangled, was plastered to her cheeks by melted snow. Her skin was shockingly pale, freckled across her nose, but beneath the frost Logan saw faint bruises, old yellowing ones, and a fresh purple blotch near her temple. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath a trembling gasp. She held her hands up as if surrendering, though they shook uncontrollably. Ranger leapt out the moment Logan opened the door, planting himself between the girl and the world, not aggressive, just alert, protective. Logan stepped forward, arms raised in a calming gesture. The cold bit instantly into him. The morning was brutally sharp. Hey there," he said gently, kneeling to her height. Up close, he saw how thin she was, how exhaustion clung to her like a second skin, how fear lived in her eyes like something she'd carried far too long. "You're all right now. I'm not going to hurt you. What's your name?" Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. Finally, a cracked whisper escaped. Laney Carter." Logan felt something in his chest tighten. Something old, familiar, the instinct that had driven him through war zones and rescues and nights he thought he wouldn't survive. This little girl wasn't just frightened, she was desperate. Before he could say more, Ranger stepped closer and touched his cold nose to her hand. The girl flinched at first, then burst into tears, raw, uncontrollable sobs that shook her thin shoulders. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around Ranger's neck. The dog didn't move except to lick her fingers, the gesture steady and grounding. "Lainey," Logan said softly, "why were you in the middle of the road? What happened?" She hiccuped through her tears, voice cracking. I ran away. I tried waving for help, but no one stopped. They all drove past. They didn't see me, or they didn't care." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of dirt and melted snow across her cheek. "But then I saw your car, and you're a soldier. Mama said soldiers help people, so I jumped out." Her bravery stunned him, terrified, freezing, but still choosing action. "And your mom?" Logan asked. "Where is she?" Lainey's whole body shuddered. "She's in that motel, the old one down the hill. Pinecrest Motel. Room 7. He's hurting her. He won't stop." She pointed with a trembling arm. Logan followed her gesture. Through the swirling snow, he could just make out the roofline of a rundown building sitting crooked against the base of the hill. The look in Lainey's eyes gutted him, pure fear threaded with a last flicker of hope. Logan removed his heavy winter jacket and draped it around her small body. She nearly disappeared inside it. Then he wrapped her in the emergency thermal blanket he kept in the Jeep. He lifted her with practiced gentleness, like one would carry something precious, and set her carefully in the front passenger seat. He blasted the heat. Ranger hopped in behind her, sitting so close that his warmth pressed against her back. The girl let out a hitched breath, still crying softly. "You're safe now," Logan said firmly. "You did the right thing." Her voice was barely audible. Will you help my mom?" "Lainey," he said, looking straight into her frightened eyes, "I promise you, I'm not leaving her behind." He closed the passenger door gently, then circled around the front of the Jeep. The motel waited in the distance through the snow, a dim shape wrapped in dread. "Stay with Ranger," Logan said. "He'll protect you." The dog gave a deep, quiet rumble in response, an oath spoken in the language only dogs and soldiers truly understood. Logan gripped the steering wheel, jaw clenched, pulse sharp with a familiar mixture of focus and rising fury. The same fury he'd felt when stepping into hostile houses overseas, knowing someone innocent was bleeding in the next room. He shifted the Jeep into drive. As the vehicle rolled toward Pinecrest Motel, Lainey reached out and placed her small hand on Ranger's head. The dog pressed closer. Outside, the wind lifted the snow into spirals, as if urging them forward. And in the distance, dim but unmistakable, Logan saw the flicker of a curtain in room 7, a shadow moving behind it, a silhouette too large. Something was happening inside, something he might already be too late to stop. But he pressed harder on the gas, because someone needed him, and because the girl in his passenger seat had trusted him with the last piece of her hope. They arrived before he could finish the prayer, forming silently in his mind. The Jeep rolled to a halt in front of Pinecrest Motel, its tires crunching over a thin crust of ice that made the entire parking lot resemble shattered glass trapped beneath the dawn. The rundown building sagged against the hillside like a tired animal, with sun-bleached paint peeling off in strips and wooden railings warped from too many brutal winters. A dying neon sign buzzed above the office window, the remaining letters flickering in exhausted attempts to spell Pinecrest through the drifting snow. Logan stepped into the cold, the air sharp and metallic against his lungs. Ranger jumped down behind him, planted solidly beside the Jeep, his posture trained and alert. In the passenger seat, Lainey Carter clutched the emergency blanket around her tiny frame, her wide, frightened eyes following every step he took. Her breath fogged the window in trembling bursts. "Lainey," Logan said softly through the open door, "I'm only a few steps away. Stay with Ranger." The girl nodded rapidly, too scared to speak. Ranger obeyed the command, "Watch her," settling beside her like a guardian carved from living amber and muscle. His ears were pricked toward room 7. Then the sounds reached Logan clearly. Thuds, something breaking, a woman's sobs strangled by pain. A man's voice rose in a drunken, furious roar. Logan's pulse sharpened. He had heard these sounds before in different countries, different houses, different wars. And in every place the truth had been the same. Someone innocent needed someone strong to walk through the door. He moved toward room 7 with long, decisive strides, snow cracking beneath the soles of his boots. The motel corridor smelled of gasoline and mildew. A sickening heaviness pressed against the door, as if the violence inside had its own gravity. Logan didn't waste time. He lifted his boot and drove it directly into the lock. The frame splintered, the door swung inward and slammed violently against the wall. What he found inside made his breath freeze. Megan Carter, a woman around 32, lay curled near the corner of the bed. She was small-framed, her dark hair tangled and matted with sweat and tears, olive skin bruised in jagged patterns up her arms and along her cheek. One eye was nearly swollen shut. Blood streaked her lower lip. She trembled every time the man towering above her moved. That man, Derek Vaughn, turned toward Logan with rage twisting his features. 38, thick-necked, boulder-shouldered, his once athletic build softened now by alcohol and neglect. His blonde hair was greasy, hanging in clumps across a forehead lined with permanent anger. A patchy beard crawled unevenly along his jaw. His eyes, red, wild, belonged to someone who believed domination was his birthright. Logan stepped forward, voice calm but edged with steel. "Back away. Now," Derek snarled. "This is between me and my woman." "She stops being yours the moment you touch her like that," Logan replied. Derek lunged, reckless, drunk, convinced of his own power. Logan moved with lethal precision. He sidestepped, seized Derek's wrist, twisted hard, and slammed the man face first into the wall. Derek roared in fury, but Logan barely flinched. Within seconds, he pinned the man, zip-tied his wrists with the restraint he always carried in the Jeep, and forced him to his knees. Derek cursed, spit threats, tried to buck backward, but Logan ignored him completely. Megan mattered, not him. Logan crossed the room and crouched beside her. "Ma'am," he said gently, "my name is Logan. Your daughter found me." Megan's cracked lips trembled. "Lainey, where is she? Is she safe?" "She's okay," Logan answered. "She's in my Jeep. She ran to get help." Relief struck Megan so hard she nearly collapsed again. Tears spilled silently from her one good eye. Logan dialed 911. Minutes later, the faint echo of sirens streamed through the snowy valley. Outside, Lainey heard the approaching vehicles. She pushed open the Jeep door, stumbling across the icy pavement, blanket dragging behind her like a tattered cape. "Mama!" she cried. Logan stepped aside. Lainey threw herself into Megan's arms. The woman gathered her daughter close with shaking hands, pain stretching across her ribs yet overcome by the desperate need to hold her child. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Two paramedics rushed in. The first, Elliot Marks, tall and narrow-faced with steady brown eyes, felt for Megan's pulse and spoke in calm, practiced tones. His partner, Nadia Ruiz, a young woman with warm brown skin and thick curls tied into a tight bun, knelt beside Megan and gently examined her ribs, her expression softening with compassion the moment she saw Lainey clinging to her mother. The sirens grew louder as Sheriff Nolan Briggs pulled into the lot. Briggs, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, his face carved by 5 decades of small-town law enforcement, stepped out with the exhausted authority of someone who had seen too many nights like this. His dark uniform coat strained slightly against his frame as he approached. "What happened here?" Briggs asked, voice deep and controlled. Logan explained concisely. Briggs nodded grimly. "I've had calls about him before," he muttered, glaring at Derek. "Never enough to stick." He crouched beside Megan. "Megan, you want to press charges this time?" Megan looked at Lainey, her daughter's small hands gripping her shirt, her face blotchy with tears. She looked at Derek, slumped, zip-tied, still sneering through swollen rage, and then she looked at Logan, the stranger who had walked straight into hell for her. Her voice came out shaken but firm. "Yes, I want him charged for everything." Briggs exhaled in relief. "Good, we'll handle the rest." As paramedics lifted Megan onto the stretcher, Lainey refused to let go of her mother's hand. Ranger walked beside her, head low, tail stiff, every sense focused on the frightened child. Logan stood in the doorway of room 7, staring at the wreckage, the broken lamp, the shattered glass, the dark stain on the floor where Megan had fallen. He felt something shift inside him, a promise forming, a storm rising. The ambulance doors closed. Snow swirled around them in restless spirals, and Derek Vaughn, kneeling in zip ties with Sheriff Briggs gripping his shoulder, had no idea that this arrest was only the beginning of what was coming, because Logan Hale had already made a silent decision. This was not over. The hallways of Snowfield County Hospital hummed softly under dim evening lights, the kind that gave the building a muted gold glow and made every shadow seem heavier. Outside, the snowstorm had thickened, pressing against the tall windows in sheets of white, reminding Logan of the sandstorms he once trudged through. Except this storm was quiet, almost reverent, as if it understood that something fragile was happening inside. The walls carried a faint scent of antiseptic mixed with the sterile cold of winter air seeping through automatic doors. Logan walked beside the gurney as the paramedics wheeled Megan into the trauma ward. Ranger moved at his heel, head low, his paws silent on the polished floors, the leash slack because he never needed it. Lainey clung to Logan's jacket, her small fingers gripping the fabric as though afraid he might disappear like everyone else who had failed her before. An older nurse at the triage desk, Abigail Monroe, a silver-haired woman in her late 50s, watched them approach. She had a round, soft face, gentle blue eyes behind thin rectangular glasses, and a voice worn smooth by decades of comforting strangers in their darkest hours. Abigail took one look at Megan's battered body, her bruised ribs, her swollen eye, and her expression hardened with a mixture of sorrow and restrained anger. "Room 212, she instructed quickly, jotting notes on a chart with fast practiced strokes. "I'll call Dr. Lee. We'll take it from here." She placed a warm hand on Lainey's shoulder as the little girl passed. "We'll take good care of your mama, sweetheart." Lainey nodded but didn't smile. She just held tighter onto Logan. Inside room 212, the overhead lights were soft, casting long beams across the bed sheets. Megan lay still as the paramedics transferred her gently to the hospital bed. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale making her wince as the bruised bones in her side protested. Yet even through the pain, she never let go of Lainey's hand until the nurses needed to examine her. Only then did she whisper, "Stay with Ranger, promise?" Lainey nodded bravely, though fear flickered in her brown eyes. The girl climbed onto the foot of the bed and sat cross-legged beside Ranger, who immediately lay down with his large head resting on her lap. She buried a hand into his thick amber fur, drawing comfort from the steady warmth of his body. Dr. Samuel Lee, the on-call physician, entered moments later. He was a man in his mid-40s, tall and thin, with an angular face softened by the kind of perpetual weariness common among doctors who work too many overnight shifts. His dark hair was sprinkled with early gray, and he wore wire-rimmed glasses that slid down the bridge of his narrow nose as he reviewed Megan's chart. Despite his exhaustion, his tone was calm and compassionate as he examined the bruises along her ribs and pressed gently on her abdomen. "She has at least 2 cracked ribs," he reported quietly. "A possible hairline fracture in the ulna, several contusions across the torso, and she's dehydrated." His gaze lifted to Logan, studying him briefly. The clean-shaven jaw, the alert stance, the military precision in how he positioned himself near the bed, half guarding, half waiting. "You family?" Dr. Lee asked politely. Logan shook his head. "No, just the one she trusted enough to find help." That answer made Dr. Lee look at him again, longer this time, something warm settling behind his tired eyes. "Then she picked the right person." When the nurses finally stepped out, Megan turned her head slightly toward Logan. In the hospital light, she looked younger, fragile, but beneath her battered exterior was a stubborn will, a strength that had endured far too much. "He'll come for me," she whispered, voice hoarse from crying. "Derek, he always finds me, no matter where I run." Her fear was genuine, carved into her bones from repetition, like someone who had lived too long in someone else's shadow. Logan moved closer, lowering himself into the chair beside her bed. "He's not coming near you again," he said, voice steady as a steel beam. She shook her head weakly. "You don't know him. He waits. He watches. He tells me I'm nothing without him. He'll make bail and—" Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to live like this anymore." Logan felt the familiar sting in his chest, the same sharp ache he had felt in war zones when civilians whispered their fears to him because they had no one else. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees. "Megan, listen to me. If he gets out, he'll have to go through me first." His words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The quiet confidence behind them carried more weight than shouting ever could. Megan's gaze drifted to Laney, who sat stroking Ranger's fur with slow, rhythmic motions. Something softened in her expression. A recognition that this man, this stranger, had stepped into the fire without hesitation. Maybe for the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone. Laney climbed off the bed and walked to Logan. She placed her tiny hand over his. "Don't go," she whispered. "Please, you're strong, and we don't have anybody else." Logan swallowed against the tightness rising in his throat. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his gloved thumb gently wiping away a tear. "I'm not going anywhere." Night settled fully outside the hospital, drowning the valley in snowfall. The storm thickened, winds whipping powder across the parking lot. Logan stepped away briefly to make a call. He dialed one number, a number he hadn't used in months. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. Mason Wilder, one of his old squad mates, spoke with the gruff tone of a man carved from battlefield memories. Mason was in his late 30s, broad-chested, his deep baritone voice, always carrying remnants of cigarette smoke and dry humor. Even over the phone, Logan could picture him perfectly. Tall, scar running from jaw to ear from a mission gone wrong, dark brown hair usually hidden beneath a cap, and eyes sharp with loyalty. Mason was the kind of man who acted first and asked questions later, but always for the right reasons. "You alive?" Mason grumbled. Logan exhaled. "Something happened. I need the team." Mason didn't ask for details. "Where?" Logan gave the location. "Mountain Ridge Armory, midnight." A click. No goodbye necessary. Logan returned to the hospital room where Megan had drifted in and out of sleep, the exhaustion finally catching her. Laney sat curled next to Ranger, her cheek resting against the dog's warm side. Ranger stayed absolutely still, understanding the importance of his presence. The room felt dimmer now, softer, as if the world outside was holding its breath. When midnight approached, Logan slipped out quietly, leaving Ranger to watch Laney. He walked through the empty hospital corridors and stepped out into the storm. Snow hammered the pavement, fierce and cold. Logan pulled his coat tighter and headed toward his Jeep. The drive to Mountain Ridge Armory took 15 minutes, but the storm stretched it into 25. The armory stood against the mountainside like an old forgotten fortress, gray stone walls, rusted metal doors, and a chain-link fence half buried in snow. The interior, however, was warm, lit by yellow overhead bulbs, and inside waited his old team. Ethan Blake, tall and lean with sandy hair and a crooked smile worn from too many bad jokes, leaned against a table. Drew Haynes, older, early 40s, with a thick, dark beard and tired green eyes, sat with arms crossed, all strength and quiet contemplation. Cole Ramirez, shorter but powerfully built, with warm brown skin and a shaved head, paced near the wall, restless energy radiating off him. They were different heights, different shapes, different pasts, but all shared the same unspoken bond, brothers forged by fire. Logan stepped in, nodding once. "I need your help. A woman and her daughter. They're in danger." Cole's brows knitted. "Danger from who?" "A man named Derek Vaughn," Logan said, voice low, "and he won't stop until someone stops him." Drew leaned forward. "What's the plan?" Logan looked around at the men who had followed him into hell before. "We keep them safe. We find a secure place, medical care, support, and we don't leave until the court takes him off the streets." Ethan's smile faded into something sharper, dead serious. "Then let's get to work." And for the first time that night, Logan felt something steady in his chest, a sense of direction, a promise forming, a storm gathering, but this time he wasn't facing it alone. Evergreen Heights stood on the east side of Snowfield Ridge, a modern 4-story apartment building built against a backdrop of tall pines and rugged mountains, its steel railings and tinted windows catching the pale winter sunshine like quiet promises of safety. The building wasn't luxurious, but it was sturdy, clean, secure, exactly the kind of place people went when they needed a new beginning. and Megan Carter needed exactly that. Logan guided Megan and Laney up the central walkway, the automatic lights flicking on as they passed. Megan moved slowly, still sore from her injuries, one arm wrapped around her ribs while the other held her daughter close. Her olive skin was no longer painted in brutal purples and reds as it had been in the motel, but the fading bruises still told their silent story. Her long dark hair was freshly washed, tied loosely at the back of her neck, framing a face that now held something new. Tentative hope. Laney clung to her mother's hand with one arm and held tightly to Ranger's collar with the other. The dog trotted beside her, tail low but relaxed, the perfect picture of a guardian who understood the mission. His amber coat caught the hallway lights, creating a warm glow against the gray walls. Every time someone moved in the hallway or a door creaked, Ranger's ears flicked toward the noise, but he never left Laney's side. Inside the apartment, the air was cool and faintly scented with pine from cleaners used earlier that morning. The two-bedroom unit felt small but warm, a place untouched by violence, untouched by Derek. The view overlooked the tree line and the distant peaks where snow collected like white crowns. Megan stepped in first, her breath catching. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Laney wandered forward like a child entering a magical cabin. "We get to live here, Mama?" Megan nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, baby, we do." Logan went straight to work, his Marine training unfolding as if he'd never left active duty. From the bag he'd brought, he unboxed a reinforced deadbolt, screws shining under the hallway light. He installed it carefully, his hands steady, movements precise. After that came the video doorbell, the sleek kind with night vision and a two-way speaker. He wired it in near the frame, ran a test call, and confirmed everything worked. Then he unpacked motion sensors, placing them discreetly along the living room corners and near the windows. Every click of a tool, every tightened bolt filled Megan with a strange warmth, like watching someone build a fortress, not for himself, but for her and her daughter. While Logan worked, Sarah Whitford, the building manager, stopped by to check in. Sarah was a woman in her early 40s, tall and slim, with curly brown hair pulled into a soft bun, her skin a warm caramel tone. Her expressive hazel eyes held genuine kindness, and she carried herself with a mixture of authority and gentleness, someone who had learned to manage trouble without letting it harden her. She wore a burgundy sweater, black slacks, and a badge clipped neatly at her hip. "I heard what happened," Sarah said quietly to Megan, her voice steady but sympathetic. "You're safe here, and if you need anything, and I mean anything, let me know." Megan nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you, truly." Sarah smiled warmly at Laney. "We've got lots of kids in the building, and no one gets in without a code, so you're as safe as a squirrel in a hollow tree." That made Laney smile. Small, but real. When Sarah left, Megan exhaled shakily, like she was finally starting to breathe properly for the first time in months. Word of Megan's situation had spread through Snowfield Ridge quickly. Quietly, respectfully, the way a small town shares news when the story demands a compassionate response. At Lucy's diner, at the hardware store, at the local church, people who didn't know Megan personally but knew pain when they saw it began donating. Some gave cash, some gave groceries, some gave small toys for Laney. Within 4 days, the fundraiser jar Lucy kept at the diner had reached $12,000, a number that stunned Megan when Logan told her. "Why? Why would people help us like this?" she asked in a small voice as she sat on the couch, the hospital band still faintly marking her wrist. Logan didn't sugarcoat it. "Because your daughter ran into the snow to save you. Because you survived what others might not have. Because this town wants you to have a fair shot." Megan's lips trembled. "I don't know how to repay any of this," Logan shook his head. "You don't have to." But beyond the generosity, everyone, including Logan, knew the truth. They were racing against the clock. 4 days after his arrest, Derek Vaughn made bail. Predictable, infuriating, legal. Sheriff Nolan Briggs sat in his office when the news came in, his thick silver eyebrows pulled together, and he muttered a curse under his breath. Of course he did. Briggs was a man shaped by years of dealing with repeat offenders, men like Derek who slipped through cracks in the system but left wreckage behind. His stern jawline and mustache twitched whenever a case like this crossed his desk. He reached for the phone and immediately called Logan. "He's out," Briggs said, voice hard. Logan closed his eyes. He had been expecting it, but hearing it aloud lit a slow burn in his chest. "What's his move?" Briggs sighed. "He's looking for her. Visited the old address, called her old job, asked neighbors." Logan tightened his grip on the phone. "He won't find her." "He's trying," Briggs said, "but we're already ahead of him." The steps they had taken worked exactly as planned. Megan's old apartment, empty. Her old phone number, disconnected. Her new job at a small bakery owned by one of Logan's former teachers, private. Her new residence in Evergreen Heights, protected by key code and 2 security layers. The team of ex-Marines, taking turns watching from unmarked vehicles, never close enough to scare Megan, but always close enough to intercept danger. Mason, Ethan, Drew, and Cole rotated in 12-hour shifts. They never parked in the same place twice. They communicated through encrypted apps. They treated this mission with the same seriousness as foreign deployments, because this time, the enemy was just as dangerous, and the stakes were deeply personal. Derek tried one more tactic, filing a complaint at the sheriff's office claiming that Logan threatened him. Sheriff Briggs read the document twice. Then he looked up at Derek, who was standing in the doorway with a smug smirk and a bruised ego. Briggs removed his reading glasses, leaned back, and delivered a stare sharp enough to cut steel. "You beat a woman in front of her 8-year-old child," Briggs said slowly. "A Marine stopped you from killing her. That's not a threat, that's a rescue." Derek's expression faltered. "You should take this seriously," he snapped. "I am taking it seriously," Briggs replied, "by not wasting county resources entertaining the fantasies of an abuser. Complaint denied." Derek stormed out of the station, his boots slamming so hard against the floor that the receptionist flinched. For 2 more days, Derek hunted for Megan, digging through old contacts, driving through familiar neighborhoods, stopping by motels, asking questions in bars. People recognized him, people avoided him, people gave him nothing. By the end of the week, Derek Vaughn dragged a duffel bag into his truck, started the engine, and drove west, out of Snowfield Ridge, out of Colorado, out of options. Silence fell over Evergreen Heights like a settling snowfall, but Logan knew better than to relax. He knew men like Derek didn't vanish. They circled, recalculated, and resurfaced. He knew peace could be temporary. He knew danger didn't always knock loudly. And that night, as Ranger curled at Laney's feet and Megan slept for the first time without nightmares, Logan stood by the apartment window, watching the snow drifting under the street lamps. His breath fogged the glass. His reflection stared back at him with tired eyes. Justice had stood up. But Logan had the unsettling feeling that something else, something darker, was still out there, waiting for its moment to return. Spring sunlight filtered gently through the tall pine trees surrounding Snowfield Ridge, casting soft gold patches across the open-air community square where a small stage had been built for the town's annual gratitude gathering. A year had passed since the night Logan Hale kicked open the door of Room 7 at Pinecrest Motel, a year since the storm, the near tragedy, the rescue, and the rebuilding that followed. Winter still lingered on the mountaintops, but Snowfield Ridge felt warmer than it had in years, as though kindness itself had changed the temperature of the place. Evergreen Heights had become a real home for Megan Carter and her daughter Laney. Megan now worked at the Maple Cup, a cozy cafe 10 minutes from the apartment complex. The cafe's warm, maple-scented air and soft jazz music soothed her in ways she never expected. Her boss, Clara Jennings, was a short woman in her early 50s, with curly gray hair, round cheeks, and eyes that sparkled with mischief and maternal warmth. Clara wore flowy patterned blouses, lots of bracelets that jingled when she moved, and a smile that made customers feel like old friends. She had hired Megan without hesitation and protected her fiercely, chasing away any customer who acted rude or invasive. "This place is for healing," Clara would say firmly. "Anyone who disrupts that can drink coffee somewhere else." Under Clara's wing, Megan bloomed. Her dark hair grew healthier, her olive skin regained its natural glow, and though shadows still lingered in her eyes, they were gentler shadows, ghosts fading from memory. She had taken self-defense classes the Marines recommended, gotten a reliable car, and started planning for a future she once believed she'd never live long enough to see. Her ribs healed. Her spirit slowly stitched itself back together, and her laugh, rare but bright, had returned. Laney had changed too. The frightened, hollow-eyed child who once ran barefoot through the snow had grown into a lively 9-year-old with a ponytail that bounced when she walked. She adored school now, clinging to math with unexpected enthusiasm. Her teacher described her as a sunflower in winter, quiet but bold, blooming despite the cold. Ranger had become her constant shadow. Anytime Megan picked Lainey up from school, Ranger sat in the back seat of the Jeep, ears perked, tail thumping the moment he spotted her. The dog had grown stronger too, his amber coat glossier than the year before, muscles more defined from running the mountain trails with Logan. And Logan, he was different as well. The weight he once carried in silence had softened, replaced little by purpose. He still volunteered with Sheriff Briggs, still watched Evergreen Heights from afar, but there was a peace in his gaze now. He spent afternoons at the firing range with Mason and Ethan, played cards with Drew at the armory, and sometimes shared simple dinners with Clara, Megan, and Lainey. He didn't say it, out loud, but somewhere between the rescue and the rebuilding, he had found a place where his soul could finally sit down. The gratitude gathering drew nearly the entire town. Families filled the benches, children ran through patches of melting snow, old men in flannel jackets shared stories beneath strings of twinkling lights. Ranger sat politely at Logan's side near the front row, his thick fur brushing against Logan's boots. The stage had been decorated with wooden lanterns, ribbons in winter blue and spring gold, and a large banner that read, "Thank you, Snowfield Ridge, for standing together." Briggs stood near the stage, beard freshly trimmed, uniform coat neatly pressed. Even he seemed softer today, his gruff expression eased by rare pride. Clara handed out cookies shaped like pine trees. Mason, Cole, Drew, and Ethan stood in the back. 4 soldiers with tough exteriors who pretended to be annoyed about attending, but in truth felt deeply honored to be part of this community that had embraced them. When the mayor finished his short speech, he announced the final part of the ceremony. A special message of gratitude from one of our youngest, bravest residents, Miss Lainey Carter. Logan felt his chest tighten. He watched as Lainey walked up the small wooden steps. She wore a simple white dress with a pastel cardigan, her long auburn hair braided neatly by Megan that morning. In her hands she held something covered by a cloth. She stopped at the center of the stage. The crowd hushed. Lainey looked for Logan first. When their eyes met, she smiled. A small, steady smile filled with the warmth of a child who had known darkness and chosen to step toward the light. Megan stood at the side of the stage, hands clasped in front of her mouth, barely holding back tears. Lainey took a breath, her voice soft but clear through the microphone. "Last year, I was really scared. I thought something bad would happen to me and my mom, and I didn't know who to ask for help." Her voice wavered, but she steadied herself, glancing again at Logan. "But someone stopped for me. Someone listened. Someone saved us." The crowd leaned in. Slowly, she removed the cloth covering the item in her hands. It was a painting, bright and bold, a Marine in uniform, a German shepherd with amber fur, and a little girl standing between them, holding their hands. Behind them was a swirl of black and gray, shadows breaking apart, dissolving into light. Lainey held the painting out with trembling hands. "Sergeant Logan Hale," she said, "you are my hero." Gasps rippled softly through the crowd. Logan rose slowly from where he sat, his throat tightening. He walked up the steps as Ranger followed beside him. When he reached Lainey, he knelt to her height. The girl placed the painting into his hands. Logan studied it, unable to speak for a moment. The child had drawn him with a warm smile he didn't even know he had. Ranger looked majestic, powerful. And Lainey looked fearless. He finally looked up at her. "Lainey, that day, you were the bravest person in Snowfield Ridge. Braver than me. Braver than most grown men." He cupped the back of her head gently. "Heroes don't always fight. Sometimes heroes ask for help when it matters most." Lainey threw her arms around him. Logan hugged her back, closing his eyes as he held the child whose courage had rewritten 2 lives and healed a 3rd. Applause broke around them. Soft at first, then rising, swelling, echoing across the square as the townspeople stood and clapped, many wiping tears from their cheeks. Megan stepped close, placing a hand on Logan's shoulder. Her voice trembled with gratitude. "Thank you for everything, for not giving up on us, for giving us our life back." Logan looked at her, really looked, seeing not the fear from a year ago but the strong woman she had become. He nodded quietly. You did the hard part, Megan. You survived. You rebuilt. You showed your daughter what strength looks like. Above them, snowflakes drifted slowly through shafts of evening light, soft, warm, silver-specked as if the sky itself had joined the celebration. And in that moment, Snowfield Ridge felt like the safest place on earth, not because danger was gone forever, but because light had returned and stayed. Sometimes the greatest miracles come quietly, through ordinary people who choose courage over fear and kindness over indifference. Not every miracle arrives with bright light or thunder. Sometimes it appears in the form of a child brave enough to ask for help, a neighbor who stops to listen, or a stranger who steps forward when the world turns away. In moments of hardship, when life feels heavy and hope seems small, remember this: God often works through human hands, through protectors, caregivers, friends, and even people we meet by chance. And if you ever find yourself in darkness, hold on, because even the smallest act of love can be the blessing that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who might need a reminder that good people still exist. Leave a comment, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue creating stories that lift the spirit and strengthen the soul. May God watch over you, guide your steps, and bless your home with peace, protection, and light, today and every day.